بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وبه نستعين. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. How are y'all doing? I wanted to make this video today to talk about what I think is a very big problem in the Muslim community. And that problem is the Aqeedah wars. The Aqeedah wars are about to drive me insane. Some of you might be blissfully unaware, but if you've been browsing Twitter recently, and by recently I mean in the last year, what you find, if you open up your Muslim X timeline, are the Salafis going and the Ash'aris going and the Maturidis going. You like my anti-aircraft noise? I don't know what I'm doing here. But and the CIA, or the enemies of Islam, or whatever you want to call them, they're like, yes, keep fighting. Keep the Muslims distracted on each other. Keep the Sunnis divided. Right? And I'm here going, ceasefire now. Let's demand a cessation of all hostilities by all involved parties in this Aqeedah war. I don't care if you're Salafi, or Ash'ari, or Maturidi, or Athari, whatever you call yourself. I'm not asking you to agree to disagree. You can think of the other group as mubtadi' or whatever you want, as long as they're Muslim, right? But what I am asking you to do is ceasefire. Put down your weapons, take it easy on the keyboards, and let's put this argument on the shelf. Because what I want to try to convince you of today is that this is not the right discussion for the Muslims to be having. And I'll get right into it. What did Imam Malik say about the Aqeedah wars? Right? Because the Aqeedah wars aren't new. People have been debating this kind of question for more than 1,000 years. So I'm going to get back to this in a little bit. But just ask yourself, what does it mean that you're going as hard on a debate that has been unresolved for hundreds and even 1,000 years? But anyway, let's go back to Imam Malik. A man comes to Imam Malik's halaqah, okay? And he asks him a question. For those of you who are unaware, one of the issues of the Aqeedah war is how do we interpret the different verses in the Quran that allude to the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, okay? So one of the famous ones is Ala al-Arsh istawa. If you translate it, and some say you shouldn't translate it, and so whatever, that means basically Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sat on His throne. What does this mean? Is it figurative? How is it not anthropomorphic, and so on? This is ambiguous. Or this is what the schools have differed on, how to interpret these kinds of verses. So a man comes to Imam Malik, this is very early in Islamic history, and he asks him, what does it mean, Ala al-Arsh istawa? So listen to Imam Malik's response. It's going to be a little bit spicy. He says, al-istiwa ma'loom, meaning this istiwa is known, it's in the Quran. Wal-kayf majhool. The reality of istiwa, how is it, what is the reality of it, how Ala al-Arsh istawa is unknown. Al-kayf majhool. The reality, the how is unknown. Wal-iman bihi wajib. It's in the Quran, you have to believe in it. And here's the best part. وَالسُّؤَالَ عَنْهُ بِدْعَةٌ. Asking this question that you just asked, my friend, is a bid'ah. You're an innovator. So Imam Malik takes it a step further, and you're going to be like, what the heck is Imam Malik that harsh? Rahimahullah. He says, وَمَا أَرَاكَ إِلَّا ضَالًّا. I don't see you except as a transgressor. And he had this man ejected out of his halaqah. Whoa. This might surprise some of you, but what you need to understand is that not all philosophical inquiry is virtuous. I think like many of you might have this impression, and I think it's a Greek value, it's not an Islamic value, that any kind of philosophical inquiry is an ultimate good, and asking questions is always great in and of itself, and there's no such thing as a wrong question. That's not part of the Islamic value system. Definitely Islam values independent thinking, curiosity, intellectualism, asking the important questions about life, but there are subjects of inquiry that are not fruitful. That's just the reality. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about this in one of the ayats of the Quran. He says that He revealed this book. Some of its ayat are muhkamat, meaning they're decisive. No two Muslims can disagree in their meaning. And they are ummul kitab, meaning they are the mother of the book. They're the basis of like what you believe as a Muslim. And then there are ayat that are mutashabihat. Mutashabihat means they have some ambiguity. There's some ambiguity in these verses. And the people who have in their heart disease, they read into these verses, they stick to these verses, seeking fitna. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the ayah, ibtigha al-fitna, right? So this is what I see in the Aqeedah war. You know, people are, you know, what is the most important disagreements that agree in the Muslim community? What are the important issues to correct in people? It's not on the issues that Muslims have differed over. You know, if you're a Salafi, as long as you see, like, do you see Ash'aris as kuffar? No? Okay, then you're basically saying that this is a region of difference which is not like as pressing as, for example, is Islam compatible with democracy? Many Muslims today in the world don't understand that, for example, Islam is incompatible with democracy. Islam is incompatible with secularism. Islam is incompatible with capitalism. How many Muslims believe in these tawaghit? Right? Because what I want to try to convince you of is to fight the real Aqeedah war. And the real Aqeedah war is between Islam and Taghut. It is not between like this intercreedal, intra-Sunni discourse, which again is very old. Like, what I see the Aqeedah wars as, I see the Aqeedah wars as a form of escapism. Because the ummah's situation right now is so bad. And the boot is on our neck from East Turkestan to Morocco. In many different ways, we're disunited. We're open season for the kuffar. We're being genocided left, right, and center. So it seems to me that many people would rather like retreat into these old metaphysical, philosophical debates rather than address the questions that are relevant to revival. Right? And these questions that I talked about, like democracy, secularism, you know, that talk about these are core to Islam. They're not, meaning that no one would disagree about these two things from a scholarly perspective. Only like a layman, an ignorant person would disagree about, for example, Islam and democracy. If democracy is understood correctly as the legislating by man-made laws. I'm a bit out of breath. So this discussion, like I said, is very old, the Aqeedah war, and you can go back 1,000 years. And Muslim scholars are still discussing this. You can actually find some differences in how these attributes were, you know, interpreted, even back to the Sahaba. Like there are some Sahaba that practice ta'wil, and this is like just a classical difference of how people have interpreted these verses. Whereas when we go into the discourse about Islam and politics, the disagreements therein about basically khilafah and democracy and sharia, and people talking about, well, we need to update the sharia and we need to kind of change things and we need to adopt things from liberalism. This kind of rhetoric is new. It only emerged in the past couple hundred years. It was limited to a few deviant scholars, like the Muhammad Abdus and the Ali Abdul Raziqs and the Rifa'at al-Tahtawis of the world, who came and basically imported Western Enlightenment thinking. And then basically after the Khilafah was destroyed, you know, these kinds of thoughts spread throughout the Muslims, and we were intellectually colonized. So the most important discussion for us to have is to intellectually decolonize the Muslim minds, desecularize the Muslim minds. That's the correct Aqeedah war. Whereas, again, like, are these metaphysical debates, which really only serve to, first of all, distract us from the important issues, They're a form of escapism from the reality of the Muslims, which these metaphysical questions are disconnected from, right? The Salafis are so, let's say, I want to use a word that's not bad, aggressive against, for example, istighatha and tawassul, right? I'm not going to explain those for people who don't know, but it's some creedal dispute that has existed like for 1,000+ years again, right? So they're all about tawheed and they're all against shirk. But how often do you hear Salafis going against the shirk of al-hukm bighayr ma anzal Allah? The shirk of basically saying that, hey, we're going to choose the laws, us human beings, not God. We're not going to rule by the Sharia. We're going to let the people vote on the law. This is shirk. You know, the parliament houses in the Muslim world are the biggest houses of shirk. Not these graves where the Barelvis go and do their Barelvi things. Okay? But how often do you hear Salafis talking about that kind of shirk? The second they do, they're going to get called kharijis by the other kind of Salafis. Because now you're insinuating anything against the rulers, right? But the fact that this discussion is hard to have is an indication that it's the right discussion to have. I don't remember who told me this, but somebody told me once, beware of discussions or beware of debates that are fun to have. And I think that might be the case for a lot of these people. Like they just like to pretend like these creedal schools are like their sports teams. Like you go on Twitter and you see people's profile names, Al-Ash'ari, Al-Hanbali, Al-Salafi, or whatever they're putting. You know, they kind of like to dress up as, you know, these old scholars and pretend like we're in 1224. You know, sometimes I have to check my calendar to make sure we're 2024 because these discussions are so. And I keep mentioning this. They're ancient discussions. So there is, I think, also an element of tribalism. There's an element of like people treating these creedal schools as their sports teams. Where, you know, when I was a kid, Italy was my sports team, my football team. My brother was France. My cousin was the Netherlands. And we cheered for these sports teams and we cried when they lost. And my cousin would throw his shib at the TV when the Netherlands lost. But we grew out of that. We were kids. You know, this is childish behavior, this tribal attitude that you adopt toward anything but Islam is childish. What the Muslims need to understand is that your in-group is the Muslimin and Islam and the ummah. Your loyalty is to Allah and His Messenger, alayhi salatu wassalam. And your brethren are all the Muslims, not your little sect. But this is unfortunately like very hard to get through some of the skulls of the Muslims, which is why I'm saying it right now in very harsh terms. We must stop this Ash'ari, Salafi, Barelvi, Deobandi, Sufi hostilities. We would benefit more as an ummah. Let me drop this one on you guys, okay? We need to ask ourselves more, what kind of behavior do our enemies love to see from us? Let me repeat that. What kind of behaviors that we're indulging in that our enemies love to see from us? Right? If you ask yourself this question, just ask yourself this question anytime you engage in a da'wah activity, what would make your enemies seethe versus what would make your enemies rejoice? And are your actions making the enemy rejoice? Because it's a nice heuristic, right? Like if you're doing the right thing, you should be angering the enemies of Islam, right? They should at least basically wish that you were not doing that. Whereas some of you, and I'm not calling anyone an agent, but some of you, you know, what does the Joker say? If you're good at something, don't do it for free. That's not an advice, but some of you could print out your Twitter timelines and go down to the Pentagon, and you could probably get a job. You know, you would meet some like old gruff general, and he'd be like, "That's impressive, son," and maybe he'll start you at like 40,000 a year. I don't think they pay agents that much. But you have to, again, like think about, are you indulging in the behavior that your enemies want to see from you? You're kind of doing the job of the enemy for free by splitting us up. So just think. When you see a trend online, like, oh, the Aqeedah wars are trending, don't just dogpile onto the trend like a lamb. We need to, as Muslims, as da'wah carriers, as imams, not feed the fire. Unfortunately, I've seen many like da'wah people and imams online just feeding this discourse. Whereas we need to basically smother the flame. We need to smother the flame, and Muslims need to be trend setters, not trend followers. Because not every trend is important to our objectives, right? Not every trend is conducive to revival. Some trends are counterproductive to revival. So we need to decide, you need to think, you have to have strategic planning and think about basically what trends are conducive for the Muslims and for the ummah and for our strength and for our unity and for the reestablishment of Islam, and then push those trends. And then when a trend comes that's a red herring, that only distracts, that only divides, we basically smother that. And the leaders have to do that. The leaders of the community have to do that. They have to smother these trends, because otherwise people are just going to go engagement farming. They're going to go, causing rifts between the Muslims, and our enemies are going to be like this. You're going to make the CIA, you're going to make some people at the CIA very, very happy. So I repeat my request. Let's do a ceasefire. Hashtag Aqeedah ceasefire, or Aqeedah wars. Yeah, just keep it Aqeedah war ceasefire. Hashtag Aqeedah war ceasefire. Let's make that a thing, and call people out. Call out anyone who is going sectarian mode on Twitter, who's making sectarian tweets, who's baiting the Aqeedah war. If you see anyone doing that, call them out. Send them a link to this video and tell them you're an Aqeedah agitator. Okay, hashtag Aqeedah agitator, because that's what these people are doing. They're agitating fitna between the different schools of thought of the Muslimin, and we're not going to tolerate that anymore. Okay, Barakallahu feekum wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Assalamu alaikum again, everybody. We're back here in the studio, and I had a little idea to push this one step forward and cement our commitment to ending this little charade called the Aqeedah war with a pledge that we can all sign. So I'm going to read it to you guys. Let me just read it to you guys very quickly, so it's not very long. It says, I, the undersigned, consider all the major Aqeedah schools, Ash'ari, Maturidi, Athari, Salafi, as my fellow Muslim brothers and sisters. While I may disagree with some schools and perhaps even consider some as deviant, maybe I'll put that as a English, even consider some as deviant, they have rights upon me as a Muslim and I upon them. Allah says in the Quran, and hold steadfastly to the rope of Allah and do not divide. And this applies to all Muslims. Okay. Furthermore, I affirm that Muslims in these trying times must unite, and that the Aqeedah war has only become a source of fitna, tribalism, and escapism from the relevant issues of our ummah. The real Aqeedah war we need to win is the ideological one between Islam and Taghut in all of its forms, capitalism, secularism, nationalism, etc. And I'll add, and not between, let's say, different branches of Aqeedah within Islam. Okay? Because these are all within Islam, and they're branch issues of Aqeedah, not core issues, for those of you who know the difference. So for these reasons, I support this proposal for a ceasefire on the Aqeedah wars. These debates can't continue to distract us from the priority, which is to desecularize Islam, meaning cleanse our Islam from Western ideology, and unite the ummah upon Tawheed. So what you basically will do is you read this, you sign your name, you can use your pseudonym if you're an online person. You put your school of Aqeedah. If you don't have one or you don't want to say what it is, you put none. But this will be a nice little way to kind of show how a bunch of different people from different schools of Aqeedah are signing this pledge to affirm our unity. And then just a quick, do you stand by the proposal above? Hit yes. And I will post these responses publicly. So they'll all go to a spreadsheet. I'll make the spreadsheet public. So don't put any, like, if you don't want to be identified, then don't put your real name. That's fine. You can use a pseudonym. But we want to see people signing this. Tweet it out. Send it to your friends. Send it to some da'wah influencers. Send it to your favorite da'i. Send it to your favorite imam. Send it to your favorite Twitter Aqeedah war agitator. And let's start calling people out. Let's start calling people out for causing division in the ummah and not fighting the real fight, right? This is the important fight. If you want to be based, if you want to be firm upon the haqq, go fight this fight, not the fight between these people. Okay? All right? Sounds good? May Allah bless you all. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.